This is something that happened about a year ago. I live by myself in an apartment building. For my job, I work all sorts of different hours. One night, I got back home at probably like 10 or 11 p.m. I wasn't really that tired, but I was very hungry. My apartment is in a suburb, and there are a handful of businesses that are really close by. So close, in fact, that they're within a walking distance. One of those businesses is a Wendy's. Now, I could have easily driven there, but I didn't want to. I just felt like walking because I hadn't got that much of a chance to walk that day, being busy at work for most of it. I just felt like getting out and getting some fresh air, even though it was nighttime. I didn't think the area was dangerous at all. After leaving, I sat out on the sidewalk for Wendy's. I could literally see it from my apartment, but it took maybe 5 minutes to walk there. The sidewalks and everything was really quiet with it being later at night. When I arrived at Wendy's, I walked inside and went up to the front counter. I didn't immediately see any other customers in there. Things seemed really quiet. Not unusual at this hour. Nobody was at the front counter either. I casually looked around the calm restaurant. Then, in the very back, sitting alone at a table, I spotted a man. He happened to be facing me and looking right at me. After making eye contact for a brief second, I looked away and back to the menu above the front counter. I knew what I wanted and just needed somebody to come up so I could order. About maybe 30 seconds or so later, an employee appeared from the back and came to the register. He asked me what I wanted, and I ordered and then paid. The employee told me that it would be out momentarily, and then I stepped away. I stood there by myself, waiting for my order. I casually looked around and saw the guy in the back was staring at me again. When I saw him, he was staring at me so intensely that I wondered if he wanted to say something. I looked at him for a little bit longer, but he said nothing. He didn't get up or anything either. The guy was starting to give me the creeps. He was sort of big, had dark hair, and remained looking in my direction. A few moments later, my order was up, and I picked it up and then started to head for the doors. I kind of looked at the guy out of the corner of my eyes when I was leaving. He was still looking at me, but didn't get up or anything. When I made it outside though, I kind of saw through the window the man getting up. I had a bad feeling. I walked on the sidewalk towards my apartment. I didn't make it very far though, before I soon heard footsteps behind me. When I did, I looked back. The man had just left the Wendy's and was now starting to walk on the same sidewalk as me. He was a long ways back, like probably 75 feet. He also didn't seem to be walking very fast or anything. But still, I was worried. The way he was staring at me was very odd, and now he leaves right after me? I started walking a little bit faster, just in case. In fact, I didn't even want to look behind me, and I tried my best to just ignore it. A few minutes later, when I was basically back at my building, I looked back again just to see. But when I did, I saw that not only was the guy still behind me, but he was significantly closer. He was now maybe 30 feet back, and he was looking right at me. I suddenly started to panic. I figured that the guy would try to follow me into my building for sure. Maybe he didn't live here, but I didn't know that. Maybe he was just following me. It would be really weird if I purposely didn't let him in. I wasn't sure what to do. But as I was getting closer to the front door, I got an idea. My car was parked out in the parking lot just a ways away. I took a left off the sidewalk and went towards my vehicle. I didn't bother to look back at the man. I walked very quickly, and when I reached my car, I unlocked it, got inside, and then locked it again. I wasted no time in backing out and starting to drive away. When I did, the man was standing a few steps into the parking lot and watching me drive off. I didn't know where I was going to go, so I just left the area and drove the streets a little bit. Maybe 10 minutes later, I returned. When I pulled into the parking lot, I didn't see him. I felt relieved, and I parked, got out of my car, and very carefully walked to the front door of my apartment building. I was very careful to look around and make sure that the guy wasn't hiding someplace. Soon, I got to the front door though and went inside. But as I was opening the door, I saw the man. There was a little space between the front door and then the actual door where you would use your key fob to get inside. The man was just sitting on the bench in that little space. It was kind of like a little lobby, and I turned around without even thinking about it. When I did, I heard footsteps behind me from the man. Then I started running. I sprinted to my car, got back inside, and drove away. The man didn't catch me, and stopped chasing me shortly before I reached my vehicle. I drove around some more and returned again a while later. This time, the man was actually gone for good. I carefully went to the door and he wasn't inside. I made it back up to my apartment safely, but by that time, the food was no longer hot. At the end of the day though, I was just glad to be safe. I don't know what that man's intentions were, but I'm pretty sure he was after me. I used to work at Wendy's. I was an employee there for 6 months, and this was several years ago now. I mostly just worked there part-time when I was going to college. The Wendy's that I worked at closed at 11 p.m. on most nights, and one time I was working there until close. It was a somewhat calm day, and things never got all that busy. Usually, like most places, in the late afternoon and early evening would be the busiest time. It was probably like 6 p.m. when this one guy walked in and came up to the counter. I happened to be working at the register, and when I asked how I could help, the man asked if he could get something for free. The man was kind of tall, thin, and had short hair that was light brown. He was wearing jeans and a red shirt. I told him that he had to buy something. The guy asked again if he could just have anything for free. Now, I regret doing this, but I was feeling nice, so I gave him a chicken sandwich for free. It was one of the cheapest things on the menu, so it wasn't that big of a deal. He didn't even say thank you though, and walked away. I thought that he was going to leave, and we got a few customers after that. I was kept busy for the next 30 minutes or so, but I soon saw that the guy was still there. He was sitting at a booth towards the back of the restaurant. He remained there for quite a while as I was still working at the front. I would get customers ordering here and there, but it really wasn't all that busy. When things got quieter, at probably 9 or 9:30 p.m., the guy was still there. He then came up to the counter again. He said, "Give me something else for free." I told him no. I said I already gave him something and I couldn't give him anything else. He asked me a couple of more times, but I didn't change my mind. He then cursed at me and walked off, going back into the restaurant near where he had been before. I was hoping that he would have just left, but he didn't. Things were pretty quiet for the last part of my shift. When it was time to close, unfortunately, the man was still there. He was just in the back on his phone and sitting at a table. I wasn't sure why he was here for so long, but I had to tell him that we were closed and he had to leave. I got a broom and began sweeping the floors. When I got closer to him, I told him that he would have to go because we were closing. I tried to be nice about it. The guy was being difficult at first though, asking why he had to leave. I literally just told him because we were closing. And the guy was like, "But why?" I felt like he was playing dumb on purpose. I told him to leave or I was going to call the cops. I was kind of losing my patience with him. Finally, the guy said okay, got up and walked out. After he left, we locked the doors and I finished sweeping. About 10 minutes later, I clocked out and was going to leave. I said bye to my manager and started walking to my car in the parking lot. But when I made it just a few steps out, I saw the man again. He was standing right next to the driver's door of my car. I was glad that I spotted him when I did. It was really dark out there, and he was just kind of standing around. I quickly walked back over to my manager, whose car was on the other side of the parking lot. I caught her right as she was entering her vehicle. When I did, I told her about the guy. She told me to get into her car, and we drove over to him. My manager rolled down her window when she got close and asked the man what he was doing there. The guy said nothing, and my manager said if he didn't leave, she was going to call the cops. The guy asked why, and she then picked up her phone and held it up as if she was threatening to call. The guy reluctantly walked away. I was able to exit my manager's car and get into mine. We both drove away then, and I was able to make it home safely. After that night, I never saw the guy again. I don't know why he was just standing around by my car. There was nothing else over there. I'm grateful to my manager for helping out in the situation. I worked at a Wendy's in the past, and this is my scariest experience from my time there. I only worked there for one summer, and it was right after I graduated from high school. At that time, I lived with my parents, about 10 minutes away from the Wendy's where I worked. For the most part, the job was alright. I didn't like it all that much, but I also didn't hate it either. Some of my coworkers were nice, and others were a little bit odd. One coworker that I found a little strange was this one guy named John. He seemed to just be a little bit weird to me. He sometimes talked to me and said stuff that were a little bit strange or even inappropriate, more so than most people. John was also probably 20 years older than me. One night, I worked into the night, and John and I guess, got off at the same time. When I was done, I left and headed out to my car. I saw John walking to his as well. When I drove out of the parking lot, John drove his car out behind me. Then I drove the 10 minutes or so to get back to my parents' house. But as I was making the drive, John followed me the entire way. I didn't really notice it until after the second turn. That's when I found it a little strange that he was still behind me. At the next turn, I got suspicious. Then, when I turned onto my street, I thought that it was really weird. I couldn't believe that he was still driving behind me. I knew that he didn't live on the same street. When I pulled into my driveway, he slowly drove by in his car. I was glad that he didn't pull in after me, but still, this was really strange. I wasn't really sure what to do about it, so I did nothing. The next time at work, I thankfully was not working with John at all. The shift went by as normal. When I got off, I went to drive home like usual. It was around the same time that I had gotten off the other night as well, probably like 9:30 p.m. As I was in my car though, I noticed another car with its lights on in the parking lot. It looked a lot like John's car. I got a terrible feeling. Still, I left and started driving home. John then began driving behind me again. I couldn't believe it. I drove all the way home again with him trailing me the entire time. When I got home, I pulled into the driveway, and this time, John pulled over on the side of the street in front of our house. When I saw that he was pulling over and not driving past like he had the other night, I quickly got out of my car and ran for the front door. I made it inside without even looking back behind me to see if John had gotten out of his car. When I got inside, I found my parents and told them about it. By the time we made it to the front living room window to look out, John and his car were gone. I guessed that he had driven away. I was glad, but still really creeped out. My parents encouraged me to tell my boss about it, and I said that I would. So the next time I worked, I did. I had almost an entire week off until my next shift, but I got there early and told my boss that I had to talk to him. We went off to the side, and I told him that John had followed me home twice from work. I said I was really concerned about it. He told me that he was glad I told him about it, and hoped that John would leave me alone, but said that John had also been fired earlier that week. I wasn't sure how to feel. I was happy that I wouldn't have to work with him, but he also knew where I lived. My boss then told me that if I saw him in the parking lot or inside the Wendys, to not hesitate to call the police, because John was banned from the premises. I told him that I would. And the crazy thing is that when I left work that very same night, John was there. He was in his car in the parking lot, and his car was running. I was guessing that he was planning to follow me home from work yet again. I went back inside the Wendys and called the police. Then I found my boss and let him know. The police showed up a short time later, and there was a bunch of flashing lights in the parking lot for a while. My boss went out and talked to them, and one officer came inside and talked to me. I was able to then get home safely, and after that, never saw John again. I never found out what John did to get fired from Wendy's, and I guess it also got him banned from the property. Overall, he was a sketchy guy. I'm glad that he didn't follow me home again that night though.